Hello and welcome to La Excellence Hyderabad and Bengaluru. This is the daily news analysis for 11th May 2020. The online General Studies batch of Prelims cum Mains 2021 has started or commenced on 7th May 2020. All of those who are interested, please direct your queries to the number given here. The news analysis as usual is divided into two parts. Firstly, we will discuss the editorial articles clubbed under Daily Editorial Enrichment Program. The rest of the important articles from the newspaper will be discussed under TNA or Targeted News Analysis. So the title for the first article of our discussion is the following: The Trends Shaping the Post-COVID-19 World. The syllabus connection has been listed here for your benefit. The issue is related to post-COVID-19 world and the dimension is related to the geopolitical shifts that define a new world order which has been precipitated by the COVID-19 crisis. Now let's see what this article is trying to tell us. As we all know, COVID-19 has affected the world in a very negative manner. It has caused so many deaths and so many people were hospitalized and so on. And this is a phenomenon not just particular to a particular country, but it is seen throughout the world, be it in USA, be it in Europe, be it in Asia and so on. Wherever you go, you see this phenomenon. In order to handle this COVID situation, countries have responded by coming up with lockdowns. They have set up in place nationwide lockdowns, and after this lockdown phase of this world is going to come down, after these lockdowns are lifted, there is going to be a new world order, is what this article is trying to tell us. And even before COVID-19, the world order was basically going through a phase of churning, and this phase of churning was leading to a new emergence of a new world order. But this churning phase or transition phase has been accelerated pretty much by this COVID-19 crisis, is what this article is trying to tell us. So this article basically points out certain geopolitical lines which will define the contours of how the new world order is going to be, of how the new world order is going to constitute. Like for example, which country or which set of countries are going to be more powerful in the new world order, which countries will have a greater role to play in the emergence of a new world order. All this is basically what this article is trying to tell us. This article firstly points out the rise of Asia. So if let us take the example of 2008 financial crisis, the Lehman crisis or the mortgage or a housing market crisis, which was basically present in United States of America. It affected United States of America very negatively, we all know that. But this negative effect also has spilled over into countries like European Union and so on. So the European Union also was affected by this depression to an extent. But if you look at the way in which the Asia has responded, the Asian countries have responded to this 2008 financial crisis, we can observe that the Asian and South Asian countries were not affected as deeply as United States or Eurozone. So 2008 financial crisis pointed out the fact that the Asian countries are much more resilient compared to the Western countries. That is the first point this article tries to tell us. But that is from an economic angle. Right now the world is going through a crisis. The name of the crisis is Corona, and it is the COVID-19 health crisis. Even in the case of health crisis, if you observe, the much affected or the most adversely affected countries are those from the West and in the Europe region. Like for example, the most affected countries, if I want to point out, what would they be? They would be United States of America, they would be Spain, Italy and other countries in European Union. In contrast, if you look at the countries in the Asia region or the South Asian region, these countries are doing relatively better as and when compared to the West. So this article basically says that this corona pandemic is going to result in the more resilient Asian region. This Asian region is going to handle the corona crisis much better than the Western counterparts, and this is going to improve their economies much better compared to the Western counterparts, is what this article interpolates. And how does this happen? Once the health crisis is handled very well in the Asian region, these countries will have more healthy working population, who can immediately go back to their workplaces of work, and they start doing their economic activity and subsequently generate lots of economic wealth. So Asia is going to rise after the COVID crisis. This is the first point which basically this article says, that this is one of the factors which decides the emergence of a new world order in which the Asian countries are going to play a better role. Secondly, simultaneously we see that the United States of America is retreating from the world arena. Like for example, if you take the case of Afghanistan, United States of America is by trying to pull back the soldiers from Afghanistan. And even if you look at the different international organizations like the World Health Organization or the UNICEF, United States of America is trying to pull back from this organization, even be it in terms of funding, be it in terms of the personnel it supplies to these organizations. United States of America is trying to contract itself. It is looking inward at the moment. And secondly, the kind of policies that United States of America is taking at the moment is that of protectionism. They are trying to generate wealth and generate jobs within their own country, and they are preventing other people from entering their country. They have made H1B visa very difficult. They have made immigration difficult. So if you look at the way in which United States of America is functioning at this point, it basically signifies or signals only one thing: it is retreating from the world arena. So this is the second point which basically tells us that there is going to be a new world order in which United States of America probably is going to play a smaller role. Now in this vacuum which is created, in this power vacuum which is created because of the retreat of United States of America, China and other Asian countries are going to fulfill this vacuum, is what this article is trying to point out. But why not countries like European Union? Because European Union has its own set of problems, which is why it will not be able to do so, is the another point pointed out by this article. So what are the set of problems which the European Union is going through at the moment? Firstly, European Union is trying to expand its ambit by bringing into its fold countries in the East European countries. So East European countries are also being allowed to join in the European Union. And in order to make them allowed to join in the European Union, certain rules have to be framed and certain resources have to be given so that they fit the framework of European Union. And in this particular phenomenon, the energy and resources of European Union is being consumed. That is the first point. And secondly, European Union is affected very negatively by the corona pandemic, because of which it won't be able to participate in the world affairs in a very big way. So the European Union is not doing well either. But now let's come to the Asian region. We started out by pointing out how the Asian region has done comparatively well in the 2008 financial crisis. It is also doing well at the moment in terms of how it is handling the COVID crisis. Like for example, China has basically flattened the curve, and India is also has not flattened the curve yet, but if you look at the recovery rate of patients in India, it is very high compared to other countries. So India is comparatively doing relatively better compared to the Western countries. So there is an emergence of a nations, and there is a strong and assertive China. China has basically trying to increase its economic might in this particular situation. In addition to this, there are energy related issues. Like for example, because of COVID-19 lockdowns, the demand for oil has decreased in most countries, because of which the prices of oil has fallen down. And who is it going to affect the most? It is going to affect those countries which are dependent on oil exports. Those countries which are dependent for their livelihood by exporting oil, they will be burdened a lot because they won't be able to generate more revenues. So West Asian countries are going to face the brunt of this problem. So the West Asian countries will not be able to export as much oil as they used to before. So they are going to face a lot of trouble. So the article points out all these kinds of geopolitical tensions that are there. First is the retreat of United States. Second is the increase in the dominance of China and the other Asian countries. And the European Union is not doing well. And there is a looming energy crisis. So because of all these reasons, there is a signal. That signal is pointing out to the emergence of a new world order in which Asia is going to play a greater role. That is what this article says. Now let's move on to the next article. So the title for the second article is The Epidemic and Ensuring Safety in Courts. The syllabus connection has been listed here for your benefit. Please have a look. The issue is related to COVID-19 pandemic and the dimension is the virtual functioning of the courts. So this article basically talks about the functioning of the courts once the lockdown is going to be lifted. Because of lockdown restrictions, the courts have shut down. Some of the courts are functioning through the virtual hearings and so on, but that has not become the norm yet. So how are we supposed to revive our court system once the lockdown is lifted? Because this thing is sure, once the lockdown is lifted, the pressure and the burden on courts is going to be humongous. The number of people who are going to visit the courts is going to be very high. So how do we protect the court system and the personnel and the police officers and the lawyers and the judges who all are basically part and parcel of the court system? How do we protect them from being affected by the corona pandemic? So this is what this article talks about. This article talks about by saying what the Supreme Court has said in recent times. Supreme Court has basically passed certain directions regarding the virtual functioning of courts. So the Supreme Court wants the virtual functioning of courts, and in order to do so, in order to give this order, it has exercised its power under Article 142. So before we jump into what this court order is, we have to have some brief understanding about Article 142. Article 142 is basically that which gives extraordinary powers to the Supreme Court to pass any order or decree necessary for doing complete justice in any matter pending before it. So if there is any matter pending before the Supreme Court, in order to make sure that there is complete justice done in relation to that matter, Supreme Court can exercise this Article 142. So Article 142 basically gives extensive powers to the Supreme Court. This is how we can understand it. Now Article 142 को exercise करके Supreme Court has said that video conferencing and conduct of trials through virtual system has to be made the norm. So basically it has asked the National Informatics Center to formulate a plan for virtual functioning of the courts. The courts have to function virtually, and for this to happen, what necessary infrastructure is required, what kind of softwares is required, etc, etc, all this has to be done by the National Informatics Center, is what the Supreme Court has said under its exercise of power under Article 142. But National Informatics Center is still in the process of coming up with guidelines for the virtual functioning of courts. It has not come up with the guidelines yet, but we can soon expect that these guidelines are going to come into place. The next thing which the Supreme Court wants is the e-filing system in various high courts. So e-filing or electronic filing is basically filing of cases in the electronic mode, be it in the case of company law or in the case of taxation law or in relation to arbitration. So there are certain categories of law under which electronic filing has been allowed. Like for example, Delhi High Court has said in 2009 itself that e-filing is mandatory for certain categories of cases. If a case is related to taxation, or if a case is related to company law, if a case is related to arbitration, all these cases cannot come in the offline manner. It has to be done compulsorily in the electronic filing manner. So this kind of electronic filing is really important in the times of corona, because we don't want any new people from being affected by corona. So electronic filing is really important. Now we must all realize that the lockdown may continue for a while. The lockdown might be lifted after May 17 in some states, in some cities and so on, but then it is going to continue in some form or the other in the whole of the country in some manner. This is because coronavirus is going to hit the country in pandemics, is what the experts are feeling. So so everyone is of the opinion that lockdown may continue for a while. So the high courts have to basically create a graded plan for the courts functioning after the lockdown. The Delhi High Court has sought suggestions from the district courts for the effective functioning of the e-courts. So the Delhi High Court basically talked to the courts under itself in order to seek suggestions from them in order to make sure that this electronic filing becomes very effective once the lockdown is lifted. So is it the case of Delhi High Court? Is it the case of just Delhi High Court that has taken such measures? No. In Bombay High Court also you have electronic courts, and they have started functioning in 2013 in relation to certain cases of company matters or arbitration and conciliation, income tax appeals, and so on. In all such cases, electronic courts have been held in Bombay High Court since 2013 itself. Now the hope is that this kind of electronic court system and electronic filing system is going to increase after the lockdown is basically dissipated. Similarly, we have the examples of Madras High Court also, where the electronic filing of cases or electronic filing of bail applications, etc., have been allowed in some manner or the other. So if you see the way in which electronic filing and e-court system is to function, some courts have basically already allowed for it, like the Madras High Court, the Bombay High Court, and the Delhi High Court. They have already allowed for some form of the electronic court system and so on, but this has to increase in terms of scale. That is what this article tries to tell us. But there is one problem. The problem is that 90% or 95% of the advocates and the people who are supposed to file these cases, they don't have the awareness in relation to the electronic filing of cases. So this is one problem that we have to sort out. So this is the electronic side of the court system. If at all we have to, there is a need that people have to be present physically in the court system, then we have to follow certain rules. Some guidelines have to be given, and these guidelines are basically what this article is trying to tell us. Firstly, not everyone should be allowed. Only those lawyers or litigants whose cases are listed in a particular day's hearing, only they have to be allowed. Like for example, if today my case is there in the court, then only I will be allowed, not everybody else. Okay, so only those lawyers and litigants who have their cases in that particular day will be allowed. That is the first thing. And secondly, thermal image scanners or cameras have to be installed everywhere in the court system, because these will be able to identify people who are not ill, who are not healthy. Whoever is sick, they can be identified immediately and necessary action can be taken. And the next guideline that we have to follow is that everybody who is going to come into the court system has to install this Arogya Setu app. This Arogya Setu app, once installed, is going to tell us the amount of risk which each person has, and by using that as a parameter, people can take necessary measures. In addition to this, you have to set up automatic hand wash machines, and you also have to give them masks, gloves, and sanitizers. All these steps have to be taken to make sure that when offline proceedings start, the coronavirus does not spread into the court system. In addition to this, the canteens that are there and all the public utility services that are there in the vicinity of the court have to make sure that the social distancing norms are followed. So this is what this article says. This article on the one hand tries to tell us that we have to increase the electronic court system or the e-filing system. On the second hand, if there is a utter or dire necessity of having an offline case hearing, then you have to follow certain measures. So that is what this article says. Now let's move on to the next article. The title for the next article of our discussion is Responding to COVID-19 at the Grassroots. The syllabus connection has been listed here. The issue is related to COVID-19 and the dimension is the role of panchayats in combating the COVID-19's spread. So this article basically talks about how the COVID-19 is going to change the perception of governance in the country as such. So even if you look into the history, the pandemics which have plagued the world, which have affected the world, they have changed the perception of governance in the world as such. Like for example, there was this huge event of the plague during the 15th century. The bubonic plague has affected a lot of people in the 15th century, especially in Europe, and this plague has undermined the position of Pope, because what happened at that point of time was that when this plague came, the Pope has said that the God is going to solve all our problems. God would come down and help the virtuous and so on, but none of this happened. A lot of people have lost their lives, millions and millions of people have lost their lives, and this as such has undermined the position of Pope, and this changed the paradigm of governance in that particular region. Similarly, if you look at any other health pandemic, the way in which the state of that day or the government of the day handles that pandemic is going to change the perception of governance as such. And that is what this article is trying to tell us. It is basically trying to explain how the present COVID-19 is going to change the perception of governance. Are we moving towards extra centralization, or are we moving towards extra decentralization? So if you remember, some days ago we've talked about how COVID-19 has led to a top-down approach in the government. It has led to a centralization in the government of power, because the central government is calling all the shots. It has become all too powerful. It is what is basically giving the different steps that are being taken. The lockdown has to extend for so and so period, the trains will run in so and so period, the people have to follow so and so norms, and so on. The central government has become all too powerful, is what that article has claimed some days ago. Now this present article talks about the trends of decentralization that we observe in the country at the moment because of COVID-19. It takes the example of two panchayats, the Kerala panchayats and the Karnataka panchayats, and it basically tells us how COVID-19 has led to decentralization of power in these two states. Let's take the example of Kerala panchayats. Kerala has a very empowered set of panchayats, is what this article tries to establish in the outset. So even before COVID, with or without COVID, there used to be this very successful system of Kudumbashree model. This Kudumbashree model of self-help groups has empowered people in Kerala to a large extent. Each woman from each household was empowered in a manner of speaking. She was made a member of the self-help groups, and they were basically empowered financially and socially, and this led to a very successful system of grassroots panchayat and grassroots governance in Kerala as such. Now this has led to what? This Kudumbashree system, which was functioning in Kerala for quite some time, has led to the emergence of female leaders in that particular area. These women who have been exposed to higher social standing and financial stability, they started participating in the politics, and they have emerged as leaders at the grassroots level. This was a positive phenomenon. So because of the emergence of these people, Kerala panchayats have been able to handle the COVID-19 pandemic in a very big manner. If you look at the metrics of COVID-19 figures, starting in the beginning, if you look at the number of COVID figures, Kerala was one of the most affected states. But if you look at the number of cases which Kerala has now, it is nowhere near to what it used to have at that point of time. So Kerala has basically been able to handle the situation well. And the reason why it has been able to do so is because of these empowered set of panchayats. This Kudumbashree system, in addition to being an engine of economic growth, it also had a flexible fund. This Kudumbashree system has a separate flexible fund, using which they have helped the old, weak and marginalized some time ago. And now in COVID-19 this became handy, because in COVID-19 the most important vulnerable people are the old, weak and the marginalized, and this Kudumbashree system continued to give extra support to these people through the flexible fund which was created long time ago. That is one point. And secondly, the panchayats have been able to take care of the destitutes that were there, who were not able to fight the COVID crisis by themselves. So this was another advantage which Kerala panchayats had, because they had extra funds, they had empowered set of people who are participating in this Kudumbashree model, they had empowered set of people in general because of higher literacy in this state. So Kerala was able to handle the situation better. Similarly, if you take the example of Karnataka also had a successful model of panchayats. These Karnataka panchayats have been able to quell or stop the spread of COVID-19 because of their empowered nature. During COVID-19 lockdown, most of the services in the Karnataka state have been stopped, like in any other state. Only essential services like public health and health departments were functioning. In addition to this, the grassroots levels functionaries like the ASHA workers, the auxiliary A&M workers and so on, they were also basically part of the task force which were formed in the local levels. So in these local levels, the task force were formed, in which the local panchayats have participated very effectively, and this has effectively stopped the spread of coronavirus to a large extent in the rural areas of Karnataka. So these two success examples have been given by this article, and this article tells us that COVID-19 has led to a set of decentralization, has led to a phenomenon of decentralization of power in the country. Now this is what this article says. Now let's move on to the discussion of DNA. So the title of this article is NIV develops test to detect antibodies. The syllabus connection has been listed here. The issue is COVID-19 and the dimension is the tools that we have in order to diagnose the condition of COVID-19. So this article basically tells us how National Institute of Virology, which is present in Pune, has come up with a new test called the ELISA test in order to diagnose the condition of COVID-19 which has affected people. So if there is any past infection, that past infection is going to be identified by this ELISA test. Before we jump into what this article says, we need to have a brief backgrounder about how ELISA test works and how is it different from the RT-PCR test which we have at the moment. Now, firstly, we will start with RT-PCR test. RT-PCR is known as reverse transcription polymerase chain reaction. So this basically detects the RNA of the coronavirus, riboxynucleic acid. Without getting into too much of technicality, we can understand it this way. RT-PCR basically identifies the current infection. So if people are being affected by coronavirus, whoever has coronavirus is going to test positive for RT-PCR. This is how we will understand RT-PCR. Then how is ELISA different from RT-PCR? ELISA is different from RT-PCR is because if the person has been affected by coronavirus even in the past, then it is going to detect it. Like for example, I am a person, I have been affected by coronavirus and I have survived coronavirus. Even after 2 or 3 months, if my test is done by ELISA, then ELISA will be able to identify that I am a person who has been affected by coronavirus. So ELISA test not only identifies people who are currently affected by the coronavirus, it also identifies people who have been affected by coronavirus even in the past. That is the basic difference between ELISA test and RT-PCR test. So now we will move into the highlights of the article. This article basically tells us that National Institute of Virology Pune has come up with this ELISA test. Then how is it going to help the country? Firstly, it is going to help the country because we don't have to depend on the external countries. Like for example, China has sent us testing kits for coronavirus, but then they were not really helpful. We found so many glitches in those systems, so the government has basically said the states to stop using Chinese kits for the testing of coronavirus. So this kind of dependency on external countries won't be there if we can domestically increase production of diagnosis tools. So if we can domestically increase tests like ELISA and so on, then we will be able to increase the production as much as we want without being dependent on the external countries. That is one advantage that we have. And the second thing is, those countries which are not able to protect themselves, do not have enough diagnosis tools, like probably poor countries in probably sub-Saharan Africa or Afghanistan and so on, maybe we can increase our diagnostic production and give these testing kits to these countries so that they will be able to diagnose the presence of infection in their countries. That is the second advantage we have. So at any rate, having an indigenous diagnostic tool is very important when you are going through a pandemic, and this problem has been solved because National Institute of Virology Pune has come up with its indigenous ELISA test. This is what this article says. Now let's move on to the next article. The title of the present article is Nepal to beef up border security. The syllabus connection has been listed here for your benefit. Please have a look. And then the issue is related to India-Nepal relations and the dimension is Kalapani border. So Nepal is trying to increase the border security in order to protect the Kalapani region, which it claims to be its territory, while India on the other hand also claims it to be its territory. Before understanding the highlights of the article, we need to understand some brief background about this particular Kalapani issue. So in 1816, we had something called the Treaty of Sagauli. In this Treaty of Sagauli, signed between Nepal and the British East India Company, which was at that point of time the supremo in India. So a treaty was signed between Nepal and the British East India Company. The Kali River was located as Nepal's western boundary. So the Kali River, as per the Treaty of Sagauli, was supposed to be the boundary between India and Nepal. But what happened is, after some time, British surveyors have showed that this Kali River to be shifting. The source of Kali River was put at some point by one surveyor. It was put at a different point in another surveyor, because and this led to the source of conflict. So what happened after this was both the countries have started producing maps in which they have shown that the Kala Pani region belonged to their own territory. On one hand, Nepal has said that this belonged to the Sudur Paschim Pradesh of Nepal. This is related to that particular area. This is my territory, is what Nepal has said. On the other hand, India has said that this Kala Pani region is basically a part and parcel of our Uttarakhand region. So both these countries have a dispute over this area of Kala Pani. While Kala Pani region is basically a 35 square kilometer small patch, why is it so important? The 35 square kilometers region plays a strategic role in the tug of war between India and China, because this is a tri-junction point, meeting point of India, Tibet and Nepal borders, and because this is a tri-junction point, it is really important to have control over this region, because there is also a pass in this Kala Pani region. We have this Lipulek pass in the Kala Pani region, and this is a really important point for India to keep an eye on the Chinese movements. And because India and China are not really in bed with each other, they are hostile, because China is hostile to India, and the relation between India and China are deteriorating in terms of border control, border demarcation. It is really important to keep an eye on Chinese movements, and for that we have to have some control. We have to have total control over Kala Pani region, and also according to a treaty of Sagoli and some British surveyors, the Kala Pani region comes under Indian territory. So that is what the background of this article is. Now what is the issue at the moment? The issue is that the Defense Minister Rajnath Singh on previous Friday has inaugurated a road to Lipulek Pass, and this is going to reduce the travel time for pilgrims who want to go to Kailash Manasarovar region. Now Nepal is not happy with this kind of move, because it does not want any construction of road on the disputed area, which is why Nepal wants to increase the security, its security forces in that particular area of Kala Pani region. So this is the gist of the article. Now let's move on to the next article. So the title of the present article is Massive Revamp of Forest Ministry Units. The syllabus connection has been listed here. The issue is related to organizational revamp of the foreign ministry units. Now let's see what this article is trying to tell us. So before we move into the gist of the article, we need to have a brief background about certain organizations which are related to wildlife conservation in the country. First is the Forest Survey of India. Forest Survey of India is basically a national organization which is responsible for the assessment and monitoring of the forest resources of India, and it does so very regularly. In fact, we have the State of Forest report, which is basically released biennially or once in every 2 years. That is what biennially means. So this report is given by the Forest Survey of India, and this report gives an assessment of the latest forest cover in India and the changes that have taken place in the forest cover over a period of time. Like for example, it tells us if the mangroves have increased in certain states. It tells us if the tropical monsoon forests have increased or decreased in certain states. It also tells us if the total forest cover in the countries has increased or decreased over a period of time. So all these things are pointed out by the Forest Report, Indian State of Forest Report, and it is given by the Forest Survey of India. This is one organization. Second is the National Tiger Conservation Authority. It is basically a statutory body under the Ministry of Environment, and it was constituted under the Wildlife Protection Act. If it is a statutory body, there is a statute which basically empowers it, right? So that basic statute is Wildlife Protection Act, and the basic aim of this NTCA or National Tiger Conservation Authority is to strengthen tiger conservation. Next comes the Wildlife Crime Control Bureau. This is also a statutory body, and it is used to combat organized wildlife crime in the country. So whatever organized wildlife crime we have, be it in the terms of poaching or be it in terms of the trade in the skin of animals, etc., etc., all this is being curtailed or controlled and monitored by Wildlife Crime Control Bureau. The next body that we have to know is the Central Zoo Authority. It is also a statutory body whose main objective is to enforce the minimum standards and norms for the upkeep of the zoos in the country. So whatever zoos or zoological parks, animal zoos are there in the country, the way in which the animals have to be protected there, the way in which the conditions for the habitats of animal that has to be maintained, etc., etc., is basically taken care of by the Central Zoo Authority, and it is a statutory body as pointed out already. And what statute gives these powers to Central Zoo Authority? It is basically basically Wildlife Protection Act. So most of these bodies that we've seen so far, be it the National Tiger Conservation Authority or the Wildlife Crime Control Bureau or the Central Zoo Authority, they're all statutory bodies. Think about it this way: the reason why we are creating statutory bodies is because we are trying to give utmost importance to the issue of wildlife conservation and environment conservation, which is why we are creating strong bodies with a statutory mandate. That is how you can look at it. But this is just a brief backgrounder. The reason why I have given the backgrounder for these organizations is because these organizations are being revamped. Now let's look into what the highlight of the article is. The highlights of the article are the following: the reorganization plan has been launched, and this reorganization plan wants to basically merge the regional offices of different organizations. Some offices of Forest Survey of India, some centers of National Tiger Conservation Authority, some centers of WCCB and Central Zoo Authority, etc., etc. All of them are going to be merged into just 19 regional offices directly under the ministry. So the proliferation of these offices is going to be curtailed, and they are going to be merged under the ministry directly into consolidated units. That is what this reorganization plan entails. Now the reason why they are reorganizing this is to improve the efficiency of the system and to make sure that there is better coordination with the ministry. So if the number of officers are lesser, then there is going to be better coordination between these offices. First thing, there is going to be better interdisciplinary coordination. Like for example, NTCA can coordinate better with WCCB or Central Zoo Authority and vice versa. In addition to this, these bodies can coordinate better with the Environment Ministry. So that is the basic objective of this kind of reorganization. But the problem is, the wildlife activists and the environmental movement activists have certain criticism in regards to this. The reason why the government is basically trying to curtail the number of offices of these bodies is because the government wants to decrease the power of these conservation wings. So when these conservation wings or the conservationist bodies are going to come down in terms of their power, in terms of their office strength, they won't be able to function well, and then it will be difficult for them to curtail the industrial projects that are there. So that is what the government is trying to do. The government is trying to make sure that the environmental clearances are given easily, and that is possible if the strength of these offices is going to be less. If the number of offices of these organizations is going to be less, they won't be able to undertake adequate research, and they will pass the reports in such a way that the industrial projects can be taken forward very fast. That is what this article says. Now let's move on to the next article. So the title of the present article is NGOs warn of a spurt in unwanted pregnancies. The syllabus connection has been listed here for your benefit. Please have a look. The issue is related to COVID-19 pandemic. The dimension is the impact on family planning services. So this is basically a small article which is related to the population and associated issues. We all know that COVID-19 has basically caused lockdown in the whole country. People are staying indoors. In addition to this, there is a temporary ban on the family planning services at government facilities. So people are not allowed to go to the government facilities and get their tubectomy or vasectomy, which are used for family planning as such, because the government facilities are occupied with bigger problems like COVID. So they are basically taking care of COVID, because of which normal operations like tubectomy and vasectomy are not being conducted. In addition to this, the access to contraceptives like oral pills or condoms, etc., are very less during the lockdown period, and this is going to increase a lot of population, increase a good amount of population, is what this article says. So a survey or a research has been conducted by Foundations for Reproductive Health and Services, whose short form is FRHS India. It estimates that nearly lakhs of unwanted pregnancies are going to be created because of this lockdown situation. Now what is the problem with this? The problem with this is that this might lead to unsafe abortions. Those of them who do not want their pregnancies will want to get themselves aborted, and some of them might want to get it aborted in the hands of quacks and so on. This is going to create a situation of unsafe abortions, and unsafe abortion is not only is not only problematic for the child, it is also problematic for the mother as well, and this is going to create a situation of high maternal mortality rate. And then this is what this article is trying to tell us, and then we have to make sure that this does not happen. The contraceptives have to be available and the family planning services have to start as soon as possible, is what this article is trying to tell us. Now let's solve some previous prelims MCQ questions. So these are the prelims MCQs. The first MCQ is, in the context of National Institute of Virology developed indigenous ELISA test, consider the following statements. So we have read in detail about this particular article. We have contrasted between ELISA and RT-PCR. This question basically asks about the same. Let's see what it says. The ELISA test is an antibody based test which detects if the body has been ever infected by virus. So even if the body was infected by the virus some time ago, maybe years ago, even then this ELISA test will be able to identify the person or diagnose the person. Next is real-time reverse transcription polymerase chain reaction detects current infection of virus. This is also right. RT-PCR test only basically identifies all those people who are going through current infection. So both 1 and 2 are right statements. So let us see if he's asking for correct statements or incorrect statements. He's asking for correct statements, so answer is both 1 and 2. Next question. Recently, Environment Ministry is planning for reorganization of various bodies and departments of the ministry. In this context, which of these bodies are set up by the Wildlife Protection Act? So we've looked at the backgrounder of different kinds of bodies that are there. Some of them were set up by Wildlife Protection Act, right? So I definitely know that the Forest Survey of India is not set up by the Wildlife Protection Act. So here itself I got my answer because I can eliminate option A, option C and option D. But then let us move forward. National Tiger Conservation Authority is empowered by Wildlife Protection Act. So is the Central Zoo Authority. So answer is both 2 and 3, which is option B. So this completes the discussion for the day. Thank you for your participation. We'll meet again.